Okay, so hello and welcome back. Now what we will do in this video, we will do a bit of subtraction basically on the Ginladi in this video. Now what subtraction is, I'm not sure essentially what we have done regarding this subtraction, but subtraction is essentially a very simple thing, meaning that of course you know that essentially subtraction and division are inverse processes, meaning that, for example, when you have essentially 3 marbles over here and 2 marbles over here, this represents a 3, this represents a 2, and when you essentially add them together, when you add these two together, you will have essentially, well, 3 marbles, and then the 2 marbles you put, essentially you just simply put them together, and then we write, and now essentially I have 5 marbles over here. So then we write essentially 3 plus a 2 is equal to 5. That's essentially the concept of addition. Very simple, right? Now of course the operation itself, you can do it on a Ginladi, you can do it on a number line, you can do it on a I don't know, using even marbles, or you can do it on using anything that you prefer, any method that you prefer. Now essentially for subtraction, what that means is that, well, you are subtracting, meaning that you're taking away something. In addition, you're adding something. In subtraction, you're taking away something. Meaning that, for example, we have the same essentially marbles, essentially 3 and 2 over here, and now I want to take these, of course I don't need the 2 marbles anymore in subtraction. Now I want to take essentially 2 marbles out of these 3 marbles. So then I have essentially 1, 2 and 3 marbles over here, and I take away 2 of them. So what remains is essentially 1 marble, right? And essentially in notation we write 3 minus 2, that essentially 3 minus 2, what remains essentially is a 1, right? So that's essentially subtraction. And again, subtraction, you can do it in any method that you like. You can use essentially this very method over here, just use essentially a couple of marbles. You can do it on the Ginladi, you can do it on the numbered line, you can do it on using the blocks method that we had before, or essentially any other method that comes naturally to you, right? Now we have an example over here in the book, which is basically, there's a man that sells these diyas. Diya means essentially these earthen lamps. There is these diyas in India, and these are made of earth basically. And then there is essentially there is a wick in there, and something like a cotton wick in there, and then that cotton wick is essentially floating in some sort of oil basically, and so it's an oil lamp essentially. So that's called essentially a diya. And the man is saying that I made 75 diyas in a day and sold 35 out of them. Now what he wants to know is how many diyas are actually left, meaning that he originally had 75 diyas, sold 35 of them, meaning lost actually 35 of them, or sold them. And now he wants to know how many are left. So one way to calculate, essentially, one way to know how many diyas are left is actually by counting. Meaning that you could essentially, the diyas are right in front of you. You can start counting 1, 2, 3, and so on and so forth, and then you know how many diyas are left. Another way you can keep track of those diyas, you can, I don't know, draw a couple of lines essentially on some surface, for example on a blackboard, on a piece of paper, whatever you prefer, and then you can cross them out, and then again you can count the number of lines, and that way you will know essentially the number of dias left, right? Another way is to do subtraction on a Ginladi, and subtraction is, of course, subtraction is actually, you can even do it on your blocks, basically. For example, so you had 75 dias available. You had 75 dias available, and you sold basically 35 of them, right? So 75 dias would be basically a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. That's a 75, right? And then essentially when you sold essentially 35 of them, that means essentially you actually lost 35 of them. So 35 of them I actually have to take away. So I will take away, as for example, this 10 and this 10 and this 10. So 3 times 10 would be a 30. So I take away 30 of them plus 5 of them. So I will take away all of these as well. And what remains is 1, 2, 3, and 4. 4 groups of 10. That would be essentially a 40. That means essentially the number of dias left would be a 40, right? Now this is, and essentially this operation, you can write it in notation as 75 minus 35 is equal to 40. That's basically your subtraction. Now you can do the same thing. I mean, if you prefer to do it this way, you can do it this way. Or if you prefer to use the Ginladi, you can essentially use the Ginladi as well. Meaning that you can say that we have basically 75, so that's 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, and 5. Then you put your marker over here, and then you have to take away 35 of them, which means that essentially on the Ginladi you will move essentially towards, not towards the right, but towards the left, because you're subtracting. So 35, essentially this would be a 5, and then that's a 10, that's a 10, that's a 10. You will end up over here. I'm not sure. Okay, you will end up over here, and then you need to count. So essentially this is the number of the dias remaining. So that's a 10, 20, 30, and 40. So that means that essentially 40 dias are remaining. And then your operation, you will write it as basically 75 minus 35 is equal to 40. So that's essentially doing a subtraction on a Ginladi. Or for example, I'm taking away 12 from a 32. So first you have to, of course, count all the way up to 32. And basically the 32, that's a 10, that's a 20, that's a 30, and 32. And you need to make sure you understand essentially where you put your marker. So when I count all the way up to 32, the number 32 would be this bead over here, this exact bead. And then the marking has been put right after the actual bead, right? So you need to be aware of that, how you put this over here. And then when you want to take away 12 of those beads, you have to move towards the left, of course, and you have to go essentially 12 beads towards the left, meaning you have to go back 12 beads. So essentially you have a 12 would be a 2 and a 10. So that's a 2 and that's a 10. You will end up with basically with this bead, right? And you will put your marker after the essentially after the beat, meaning right over here, right? So you have essentially 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9, excuse me, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 11 and 12, right? That means that essentially the beat that I'm actually looking for is right this beat over here, right? Is right this beat over here. So again, I have to essentially to put my marker after the beat, meaning on the right hand side of the beat that I'm actually looking for. It might be a little bit confusing, so you have to do this a couple of times until you get the hang of this. In the addition, this problem does not exist, but in subtraction, it might be a little bit confusing. Sometimes you might make mistakes. So then I can count. I can count. Basically, I have a 10 and a 20, so that means that 32 minus a 12 is equal to 20, right? Or suppose that you want to take away 9 from an 18. So you will essentially count all the way up to 18, which is a 10, and then that's a 3, 6, and 8, so that's an 18, and then you put your mark basically after the actual beat, which is right over here. So this is the actual beat that represents the number 18. Now from the number 18, you want to take away 9 beats, so you have to go back 9 beats. So that's 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 and 9. That's basically 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 and 9, and then which essentially means that now all of these beats I'm supposed to take away. So the beat that actually remain, all the beats that remain for me are starting from here all the way up to the beginning of the Ginladi, right? So I put my mark over here, and then I know that essentially these beats now I have at my disposal. Okay, again, I mentioned this before. It's basically in subtraction, it gets, at least to me, it gets a little bit confusing. And then I need to count. So now my marker is over here. Essentially all the numbers to the right hand side of the marker I don't care about anymore. I simply care about all the numbers to the left hand side of the marker, because as you saw before, we always put our marker to the right hand side of the actual beat, meaning that, for example, when we want to mark the number 18, we put our marker over here, but the actual number 18 is this beat, which is to the left hand side of the marker, right? So which means that essentially all of the beats to the left hand side of the marker are essentially the beats that are remaining for me. So then I can basically say that this is 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 and 9, and that's essentially this calculation. 18 minus 9 is equal to 9, or essentially 12 minus 8. Okay, so now let's do this calculation, 12 minus 8. So I will do it on this Ginladi. I will do it manually so that we can see essentially how we can actually work with the Ginladi. So I'm going to erase all of this. Okay, and then basically, okay, so that's a 12 minus 8, right? Now a 12 minus 8, basically a 12 would be a 10, so essentially all the way up to here is a 10, and then basically that's 11 12, so that's essentially a 12, right? Meaning this very beat over here is actually number 12. But as you saw in the book, the convention is that they put a small sticker next to the actual beat on the right hand side of the beat. So I'm going to keep the same basically I'm going to keep the same convention. So I'm going to essentially erase all of this, and I'm going to put a sticker over here, and I'm going to write basically a 12, right? Which means that the actual number 12 is actually this bead over here, right? Okay, so now basically I want to take away essentially 8 of these beads, which means that essentially on the Ginladi I have to essentially move towards the left hand side, because I'm taking away things. I'm not adding anything, so I'm going to move towards the left. So I have to essentially to move basically 8 steps to the left, meaning, or essentially I have to take away 8 beats. So that's, and you need to be careful, meaning that, for example, if you say that, so I'm going to move 8 steps towards the left, essentially the mistake that you might make is that if you started from the actual beat, then you would say this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and essentially what remains essentially are these 3 beats, right? Which is not right, because of the fact that when you start counting like this, you will lose track of the first beat, right? So you have to essentially you're counting, you have to do it right. So the first beat, you have to count it as well, because you're taking it away. So then this would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. All of these beats have to be taken away, right? And then I could essentially put my marker over here, and then essentially what remains essentially is essentially 1, 2, 3, 4 basically beats over here, which means that 12 minus an 8 is equal to 4, right? Now let's do one more of these, because this is actually a little bit tricky. You might make mistakes. Okay, so now let's do this calculation, which is essentially a 30 minus an 18, which is a 30 minus an 18. So first you want to basically locate the number 30 on your Ginladi. So the number 30 would be, this is a 10, a 20, and a 30. So this bead over here is actually the number 30. So I put my sticker over here and I write 30 over here, right? Now I want to take away 18 of these, basically 18 of these beads basically, and please pay attention to the words that I'm using, the exact words. I want to take away 18 beats. I'm not saying that I want to go back 18 steps or go for, no, I'm not talking about steps. I'm talking about actual beats, taking away beats. So an 18 would be a 10 and an 8, for example. So I take away essentially all of these basically 10 beats all the way up to here, and then I will take away essentially all of these 8 beats over here, and then what remains is essentially all of these beats from the beginning all the way up to here. So I put my marker over here, and then I can count. So that's a 10 plus a 2, that's a 12. So that means that essentially a 30 minus 18 is equal to 12. Okay. Or if you want to do this calculation, 23 minus 14. 23 minus 14, you can locate 23 on the number line, which is 20 and 3, so that's 23. I put my marker here and I write 23. And now you want to take 14, basically 14 beats out of these beats. So that's 3 beats. That's 10 beats, that's 13 beats. 3 plus 10 would be 13, and then one more, and then, so you have to take away all the way up to here. So I put my marker here, and now I can count from the very beginning all the way up to this bit over here, which is 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 and 9. So I write 9 over here, and 23 minus 14 is equal to 9, right? 23 minus 14 is equal to 9. Or for example, let's do this last one as well. Suppose that I want to do 26 minus 17, for example. 26 minus 17. So 26, I locate 26 over here. That's 20, that's 3, that's 6. So I put my marker over here, and I write a 26, right? Now I want to take away 17 of these beats. So that's basically 6 beats, and that's 10 beats, that's 16 beats, and I take one more, that's 17 beats. So I put my marker over here, and then I have to keep counting start counting from here all the way up to here, which is essentially 9 beats. So I put a 9 over here, and 26 minus 17 is equal to 9. And that's basically how you do subtraction on a Ginladi. I hope that this video was helpful, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you.